I've actually been drinking ketones for a little over 7 years, believe it or not, which is crazy. I've been doing a ketogenic diet for a little over 10, and that's where kind of my journey started. So we published studies on anything you can imagine, from nutrition, supplement, exercise. Tons of studies were published and really got interested in the ketogenic diet. Not so for myself, but I had a lot of family members, and I'm sure this story is very similar to many of you. Obesity, heart disease, diabetes runs prevalent in my family. And I was like, you know what? Like, what if there was a chance that like we just weren't eating right? We weren't eating well. And so I was like, you know what? We kind of stumbled across a higher fat, lower carb approach. And that kind of led us down a path of doing research on the ketogenic diet, and eventually started isolating out and saying, you know what? Maybe the benefits are driven by ketosis. Like, what if you could drink something? What if you could literally take ketones, put it inside of a powdered form and drink it? And for us, that kind of started down this huge rabbit hole of figuring out, all right, how do you do this? And that's kind of when we met Brian Underwood, and kind of the conversation just grew from there of figuring out, how do we take this to the masses? It's not a supplement. And I think that's really, really interesting, is because you think about this, like when someone drinks protein, or if someone takes creatine, there's one real benefit of that, right? Like there's a one benefit. And at first, the main benefit of ketones are that they are a different fuel source than carbohydrates or glucose, particularly for your brain. And now, why does that matter? Well, first off, after the age of 30, and this is in every single individual, after the age of 30, our brain's ability to utilize carbohydrates and glucose goes down significantly. Well, it's starting to happen to our brain. Our brain can't utilize glucose and carbohydrates as well. And so we have a totally other source of fuel. But before Prove It, the only way that was really able to be accomplished was by extreme fasting or a ketogenic diet. And that's one. And so if ketones were a supplement, they would solely be acting that way, but they're not. The other benefit that a lot of people experience, which is like me, I'm sure many of you are like this as well. If you're quarantined, I have a snack cabinet over there that if I wasn't in ketosis, I would eat all of my quarantine snacks probably within the next, 3 hours. Like I would eat all of them, right? Like you get these snacks and you're like, oh, this will last me 2 months, and you end up lasting you 2 hours. That's very common, all of us. And that's because our hunger hormones are all over the place, right? When it's available to us, our hunger hormones are all out of whack. Ketones act on certain neurotransmitters in the brain that actually blunt hunger. Ketones help keep us really full, which is great, right? It allows us to go longer periods without hitting the snack cabinet. And then on top of that, so that's number two. And then another benefit that really can apply to anyone and everyone is that ketones have anti-aging properties. But the main three that can literally apply to you and every single person in your life that you know are a different, better source of fuel for the brain. It helps with appetite and hunger regulation, which those two alone apply to every single human being. And three is everyone's looking for anti-aging. Studies show that there are certain signals, I like to refer to them as light switches, like that turn off as we get older, right? And they're called histones. And they start to get turned off as we get older. It's one of the main mechanisms that we think drives aging. Ketones, and this has been shown over and over again in research, ketones actually act as like bodyguards to these light switches and say, you know what, nope, it's not time to turn off yet, let's keep the light switch on. And so we've actually published studies in animal models where we've literally fed animals ketones their entire lives, did nothing to their diet, and compared to their counterparts who did not have ketones, they had a placebo. The animals that had ketones, literally the exact same ketones that are in here, lived significantly longer and had overall better health when we kind of at the end of their life. And that was extremely promising, and kind of one of the things that blew my mind and said, wow, this is much, much bigger than just a fuel conversation.